Enter the crib. Your Strike Back SitRep starts in 3, 2, 1. Wait, do we go on 0?
Welcome back, guys. We are excited to talk to you about episode 2 of Trackers. And not only that, we have our very first interview from Trackers.
Woo!
And we had the opportunity to talk to Sisanda Henna, who plays Nkunzi, the badass, angry gangster. So you will get to hear from him after our review. We're really excited. I'm Kelsey.
That was a great interview too. What a great guy.
It was.
And I'm Deb.
It was a great interview. He was delightful, and we really get to hope he is also going to be in the upcoming movie Rogue with Philip Winchester, done by MJ Bassett. So we are really hoping we'll get to talk to him again. We does talk a little bit about it, but that's a ways in the distance. Yeah. So just
pretty
phenomenal.
Excited about it.
Yeah, what a nice guy. So
yeah.
So episode 2, some answers, a lot more questions, a lot of threads. Will be interesting. Just so you guys know, we're going to kind of change up our format. We're not going to do the sort of standard favorite fight, favorite emotional moment, etc. Just because we felt like this is not that type of show where we kind of were expecting it to be. And so we don't want to just keep going well, I didn't have one this week. Because it's not reflective of our not liking the show. It's just it doesn't have quite the same type of moments that Strike Back did. It's a longer, more. Anyways, I think you guys probably understand what I'm saying. We will still have our what the fuck moment though, because
there's always one.
Yeah. So, Deb, your general thoughts.
I really enjoyed this episode too. I thought it was, we often are prepared for a little bit of a letdown in an episode 2, but I don't think we got it. I think it just kept going and definitely built on last week's multiple setups. We got further into the plot with Lemmer and were introduced in such a great fashion to Nkunzi, and still some confusion on just who the heck are all these people, but you can see where they're starting to sort of carve out their places in our little terrorist mystery going on here. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it furthered the plot quite a bit last night.
Yeah, I as well, same. And there's definitely, the rhinos aren't really just rhinos. They're carriers, apparently. So that was really interesting to me. I thought it was kind of a bummer, and we sort of predicted that Lawrence would die because he was kind of like the most likable character. I didn't really expect it to be so early. That was shocking and sad. But seems to have will seem to have spurred Limmer into action, maybe. So, did they fridge Lawrence? No, it doesn't work for men. I don't think that's not a thing. I mean, I understand you can, but it's generally because it's a thing for women. So
yeah,
it's like reverse racism. It doesn't exist because it's not systemic. Anyways, okay, that's aside from the point. So, yes, I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought it's nice to see all the stuff coming together. I still have real problems with Mila, the abused wife. I thought her scene, if we were still going to do emotional moment, maybe would be that one where she's her husband's gripping her shoulder and then her hand under the table. And while to others it may look, innocent touches, you can tell by her body language.
Oh, yeah, that he's crushing her hand.
Yeah, and that he's beat the shit out of her in the past.
Yeah.
So that was hard, but I really have an issue with how good she is. At this job.
You really have to think, okay, I just don't understand how a person with 0 experience gets thrown into a top secret international terrorist hunt. So either it's just a bizarre storyline or there's something more there with her, because she's just too good to be picking up the details. She is.
I guess they talk about her having a journalism in school, but again, and yes, journalists are a detective of a type, but that's been a long time.
Yeah, over
And she
20
doesn't,
years.
yeah, and she doesn't have any training. Is the
Right?
thing, like she
comes
might
from-
come out of after 20 years and have a natural aptitude, and after a training period, be able to spot those connections. But to be able to spot those connections when the people who have been working there forever don't is
a little.
that's the least
Yeah.
unbelievable thing about the whole deal to me. But in general, I did, yeah. I mean, I really liked it. I think it will be interesting to find out more about the operation that went wrong and how
Yeah.
who
yeah.
like Limmer lost.
Who was it that Lemmer lost? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I thought it was
Because I mean, I'm not wrong in thinking whatever he's talking about is connected to that.
I think it must. Well, although they say like nothing happened in the thing, like the whole deal why they're being shut down is because they stopped something and then no terrorist attack happened.
Yeah. It was
And
like
then
a big
he lost
international
someone,
conference.
so that would feel like something happened. So maybe they're two
Right.
separate events. I don't know.
Yeah.
That is a little confusing. So I don't know if we will find out more of that. I liked Sisanda Henna's character Akunzi because he's so
Yeah.
terrible, but he's so like swaggery bravado, like that white suit on the
Yeah.
beach and stuff was really interesting.
Well, what I liked is he established him immediately as a very unpredictable character.
Yeah.
You know, just the whole scene on the road there, his behavior just swung so quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
you knew someone was going to die, just because he was clearly very brutal. And yet within that whole scene, you know, like the way that he talked to his men, he just immediately de-escalated and, you know, what? You know,
Yeah.
what do you mean he's dead? And like a pretty level conversation
Yeah.
with his men. And then as soon as he had to be like, okay, now I'm back in badass
Yeah.
threatening mode, you know, switched it just very quickly. So I
Yeah.
like that he's immediately unpredictable,
Yeah.
which is, you know,
It's
and
interesting. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right. He does kick it off with that. I think I will be interested to see how he knows Flea though,
yeah,
because she obviously is in on this. She knows the beyond him middleman.
yep,
So, like, did they know each other? Was holding the gun to her head all a show, and that's why Lorenz, like, even though he's holding the gun to her head, when they still didn't answer, he he
yeah,
shoots
yeah,
him, and so that will be, yeah,
And
and
isn't it? I don't know about you, but when Lemmer's hiding on the side of the road, did you just like automatically assume, okay, now we're going to go into Stonebridge mode?
yes,
He's going to come out guns blazing and
that is
take them all out.
that is
And I'm like,
exactly, and then he just comes up. He's like, okay, and then they like knock him on the head, and I was like, oh.
wait a minute, don't go real life on us.
It's not Strike Back. Yeah, but all in all, I think it's a really good, solid episode, especially because we had so many threads
Yeah,
last week and so many questions, and it just felt like you got to watch this repeatedly to figure it out. And this one, I would still recommend 2 watches to pick up on a lot of it, but
because
those
a lot of
threads
the
are
stuff going
starting
on
to
with
come together.
Osman, correct?
Yeah.
A lot of that. I mean, no wonder he's been so hard to read. We don't really know who he's playing for. And I loved how you could just feel his anxiety when the diamonds didn't show up. I mean, like, and when Flea says, we'll meet in 3 days, and he's just like yelling, I don't have 3 days. I'm like, oh, I almost feel bad for this baddie.
Yeah.
This is not working out the way they planned. And well, I mean, clearly the what the fuck moment was fake horns on the rhino.
Yes, absolutely. I was like, man, that is a realistic looking horn they're holding there. And I was thinking, I mean, I know that that take for removing the horns is a thing that they do already. Is that a thing? Using them as smuggling devices?
That it will be in the future.
That seems super dangerous. Like those rhinos are not. Oh, like there's a lot of steps you got to be like basically taking them from the you gotta like I don't know. There's a lot of
It was-
steps to move some diamonds.
But it was pretty fun. I was like, oh, that's fun. I liked that.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
made up for the fact that these rhinos are really not that large. They've got them in these big, huge shipping containers, and she's got a 6-inch needle that she's just on the top of the truck when she's sedating them.
It's not even like a dart gun. It's like she somehow reached down through the like 8 feet of the shipping container.
And it was like
she's like Mr.
no.
Elastic. Her arm just grows. What you didn't know is that secretly this is a superhero show. But yeah, okay, so both agree on the what the fuck moment. So questions going forward. What the fuck? I mean, that's like
really, yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to see. I cannot wait to see what happens with. Oh, and who's the guy in the yellow sports car?
Oh yeah, definitely. Who's that?
Yeah, because that was quite a little game-changing, possibly, out of left field ending there. Like, what was that all about? And what does he have to do with anything?
Right.
But that was kind of cool. And I loved that last shot of him, chasing the guy and then coming up over and looking over the township there. That was,
so, yeah. Man, running through that township is such a reminder, too, that, like, how, I think too often we see Africa like that, we don't see the, like, big, beautiful cities and, technologically advanced areas that they have. But at the same time, being taken to that and realizing, like, those are houses is, like, wow.
And just over that little embankment is,
everything.
$100,000 sports cars and
pretty
wild.
Pretty wild. But yeah, I agree. A really cool shot. And the other question I have, the big one, I think, not the big one. I have lots of big ones, but will Limmer tell the unit his involvement and what's been going on? Because to me, if it's a like a Wyatt character who got out and was burned and whatever, or Scott, like if they get involved in something that like 20 is also involved in, they go back to them probably, or whatever. So obviously it's not Strike Back, I know, but I'm curious, will he continue to run, or will he end up working with them? So
yeah, it's interesting because at this point he has no idea that there's a bigger picture to this. He's another little tidbit that I loved is that real world, someone was murdered with my gun and now I don't have my gun and I need to get that gun back.
Yeah.
Whereas we're just used to, okay, let's shoot 50 people and move on. Like no one's going to follow up on that. So I love that they use that real world, as another anchor with his character. Yeah, he can't just let that go. He's got a real reason to follow up beyond what's with the deal with the diamonds,
Yeah.
So at this point, all he knows is someone stole some diamonds. He doesn't really have a bigger connection. He just wants his gun back.
That's true.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when does it intersect that they figure out that they're both involved and looking for the same people.
Yeah. So all in all, I think a really solid second episode that gave us some good clues and answers enough that you don't feel like it's just sort of mind-blowingly confusing anymore. Right.
Yeah.
So
like we have some sort of a direction for all of these characters now, and with the introduction of yet another baddie. There's a lot of baddies going on, and we're it's kind of fun. We're used to like a main baddie and mini baddies throughout, and all of these baddies are playing their game at the same time and seem to be double crossing each other.
Yeah, right. That's what I say.
Awesome.
Like, it will be interesting to see how those all are actually interacting.
Right.
Yeah. It's very cool.
The fact that I'm feeling worse for the baddies now than I am for the people who are supposed to be pulling for.
I think that's probably also like a symptom of like we haven't seen the baddies other than Ikunzi killing Lawrence, which we didn't like. we haven't seen them do anything particularly heinous to innocent people.
Right.
Once that happens, that will probably change.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, but I think it was good. Anything else to add?
I'm excited for next week. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what's going on with Yellow Car Guy. How does he fit into everything? You know, what big magic act is Mila going to pull out of her hat again? And what's going on? You know, how's Nkuzi going to get his diamonds back?
Yeah.
Which apparently aren't his diamonds.
Right,
so.
exactly. Somebody's getting diamonds, somebody's getting money. I don't know. So, yeah.
And I'm guessing somebody's getting dead, but we'll see.
And on that note, next up, hear from Nkunzi himself, Sisanda Henna.
Oh, and just a little tidbit. I do believe when we were talking to Sisanda that we said the raid was filmed in Malaysia, which was wrong. It was filmed in Indonesia. Yeah. As soon as we said it, I was like, I don't think that's where.
Fair.
So
Fair.
yeah.
Close, but not the same thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Good editorial editor's note. Good job. All right, guys, we will catch you next time.
Okay, see ya.
On me, back to the crib.
Hey, Meebers, welcome back. We are here to talk about episode 2 of Trackers with our very special guest, Sisanda Henna. Did I say that correctly? I should have asked you that before. Sorry. Who you will recognize kind of burst onto our screens last night in the role of the ever so nice man Nkuzi. But you also may have recognized him from several other things, especially if you are a fan of the British show Deep State. So he's been in a lot of things. And I'm sure for me, when I first saw him burst into the scene on Trackers, I was like, I know that guy. So it was fun to go back and realize how many things I knew you from. But now you're playing Nkunzi on Trackers. And you did pretty much burst onto the scene last night. And I'm just curious. One of the things that we love on Strike Back so much is that we get to really know something about our baddies, and beyond the fact that they're just baddies. And we've only had a few minutes of Nkuzi, but I'm wondering, how much are we going to get to know about what motivates him? And if we don't get to know much about it on the show itself, what kind of backstory did you create for him?
So before I answer that question, I want to just know what you guys saw last night, because I know that, so HBO cut a different version from Mnet, and there's a different cut on the ZDF version of the show as well. So I'm interested to know, where did the episode end? If you were just to give me a quick summary, what happened?
It ended after your meeting on the beach to discuss the fact that there are some diamonds missing. And then after that scene, it went to Flea sort of setting up an additional transition of the diamonds. And so it looks like there's maybe some double crossing between the baddies going on here.
Okay, very good. Now that's the part I can't explain, because the more you watch, you're going to realize who's doing what to whom.
Okay.
I mean, if I don't even want to, insinuate, but you'll figure that out, that's what's really good about Dion Mayer's writing. And he's the author, and he's also one of the producers, and he was also one of the writers that adapted the book into the teleplay that we see now. In fact, I'm reading another Dion Mayer book. I'll find it for you, but he is such a great writer. Like, he is so good with thriller. And people be surprised that his native language is Afrikaans, which is a dialect of Dutch. Mm-hmm. And originally he wrote in Afrikaans, and then his books got translated into English and many other languages.
Okay.
So now he's producing a couple of things for film and television series. So that's Dion, and he's such a great guy. I'll share a picture with you of me and Dion please remind me, I gotta send you that picture of Dion, myself, and Tapelo Mokoena at the premiere in Johannesburg with Mnet. And it was such a special moment, anyway, with Dion. So the question was, let me know if I've missed anything. What other kind of backstory and motivation did we create for Nkunzi? So when we had the discussion with the creative producers and the writers about, because we wanted to create, fuller characters, right? So they're not just kind of one-dimensional. My passion and commitment has always been for people to have a palpable experience with the real person. So Julius Shabangu Nkunzi is a real person, and if Dev and Kezi were to meet him, what would the experience of him, if any person meets him, what would he be like? Because he's a real person. So it was about making sure that his history is three-dimensional and it's full. So he's a very loyal person, okay? And I don't know if you guys saw, but in one of the takes, when they kill Snake, I don't know if you guys saw that, when the truck comes around, one of his men is standing in the middle of the road, and the driver of the truck is trying to swerve away from this guy, but hits the guy and he dies.
Yeah.
And he says in Zulu, "Babulelu Snake." One of his sidekicks says to Nkunzi, "Babulelu Snake, Nkunzi." That's when we first meet him. In one of the takes, like, there's actually a moment where one of his sidekicks comes really close to him and he says, "Snake is dead." He says in Zulu, "Is he dead?" And he's really bothered because he's a second cousin of his, right? So what we created was that all of the people that work for him are somehow related to him, either like they are a cousin or like a cousin through marriage or a nephew or something, because in order to trust people when you're in a gang, they have to have deeper levels of motivation on why they'll always have your back, because that kind of work is very dangerous, right? So how do you know you're never going to be double-crossed, or somebody will be paid to sell you out, or to you know what I mean, to sell evidence to the police, or to be a spy or whatever? So most of the time he's always brought around his close family members as much as possible to do that. And I don't know, did you guys notice he has like a traditional bracelet that he wears?
Yes, yeah.
I did not notice that, so please tell us.
So, I mean, this guy's like, he wears Versace.
Yeah.
He's got, I mean, he's
the
a millionaire.
white suit, Yeah.
And yes. So there's all of that, but then there's a lot of African spiritism that he believes in about ancestors and those things, because he's been in a lot of shootouts and every time he survives, right? So how does he get out each time? And some Zulu traditions are that when you sacrifice something for the ancestors and you wear this piece of sheep skin around here, it carries some kind of protection. And these are some interesting aspects. If you look closely, he's got 2 scars on his cheeks. And that's also a traditional marking that at a certain coming of age, when they do that, it's small cuts that they put like sort of this sort of medicine in there, and those remain, but it's a traditional marking that also it's to honor as ancestors and the spirits that they believe in. So it's stuff that I'm not really into that stuff myself, but the more I did research to find out like the big sort of mafia, Zulu sort of mafia leaders, how they've done a lot of that stuff. And they believe a lot in it, which kind of, so they believe in a lot of that stuff that protects them and helps their businesses to succeed.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I was going to ask you, because I saw an interview that you had done where you talked about working with someone and speaking with someone who had been in a gang and has sort of turned around his life. And can you tell us a little bit about that and what you got from that?
Yes. So I'm so interested that you found that interview. That's interesting. So I made friends with this motivational speaker, but he's an ex-con, right? And he's an ex-general of a gang. So in South Africa, there's the Numbers Gang, which operates in prison and outside of prison. And they have a lot of tattoos on them, which marks so many different things, but like the gang culture and the gang code. And he had risen up in the ranks. And I mean, what they dealt a lot with just drugs and mostly selling drugs and then extortion, etc. Things like that. So, and he was sharing that for me. And this is some of the stuff that I found very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
These guys have to be leaders. As much as you might not like, we don't like what they do and how they do it, but there's certain leadership qualities to be able to wield that kind of power in such a dangerous environment. And these are the interesting sort of dynamics that I got from how they operate and how one rises up the ranks in those kind of setups. Yeah.
That's really cool. What a cool experience.
Yeah.
Since you brought that up, it made me think about episode 3, which, our viewers haven't seen here yet. And I think we can talk about it without really giving anything away. But I think a lot of that aspect of Nkunzi's character comes out in episode 3 because they show you in your home or show him in his home.
Yeah.
There's a party going on. And it's clear, I got this vibe that, okay, you're having this party for them, that, this is sort of how I pay back all the people who are loyal to me, to take care of them on a daily basis. And that they're also there to protect you. Is that at all accurate about this character? Because that was, I was watching it thinking, yeah, he's taking care of his family. And so that kind of seems to fit in with what you learned from that man.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed Kunzi, and it's interesting that a lot of people, and I'd love to hear from you guys how people respond to him as well, and in general. But like, I was surprised that people liked this bad guy, and how it's very interesting. But as an actor, for me, he's a real man. And so there's a care and a love for his kraal, and kraal is an Afrikaans word for, in both even in Xhosa and Khoi and even Afrikaans communities back in the day, they would build this where they keep all their cattle and sheep. Mm-hmm. So like if you go back 80 years, 90, even 100 years, they would have to build this thing made of wood, and that's what the kraal is. And the kraal would basically be a man's domain. And that word will come up in episode 3, the word kraal, bull and kraal. And then that's when it makes sense. But basically, it means your kingdom or your domain, because your most precious things, which back then were always cattle, and how many cattle a man had, that was his wealth, And so, yeah, Nkunzi really, he really takes care of that. And for him, he values the people in his crowd. So yeah, true.
So this just a very basic question about the show, because one of the things we really liked was all the use of different languages in the show. You have the Afrikaans and the English and the Zulu, and I'm wondering, because frankly it's hard for us, having never heard so many of them, to tell them apart all the time, aside from English, obviously that's not right. But I guess my question then is for you, being like from there, what are you most familiar with? Does everybody there speak all the different languages, and how are they used sort of like in common society, not even in the show, but is there, obviously I know Afrikaans was largely, from the Dutch, and probably I would think more of a white language, but I guess if you can explain sort of the dynamics there. Sorry.
Yes,
I don't know if I'm even asking that right. Sorry.
Yeah, you're asking it completely right. So South African, that language and cultural dynamic is very, very interesting. And there isn't a very clear distinction down color or race about where language sits and begins and stops. So yes, even though Afrikaans we could say it had been predominantly spoken by white people, but there's a lot of people of color whose first language is Afrikaans.
Okay.
But it's a different dialect of Afrikaans, right? So before the Dutch came to the continent or came to South Africa, there was the Khoisan people, right? So, and there was the Xhosas and the Zulus, and they were occupying the space. So the language, so a lot of the Khoisan, or San and the Khoi, other people call them Bushmen, and they were the hunter-gatherers. And I don't know if you're getting a picture in your mind of what they look like, but a lot of them are still in Namibia now, kind of live that nomadic life. They adopted Afrikaans to become their primary language. And so there's a community of people of color. And in South Africa, the apartheid system called them colored people.
Right.
And then because they made a couple of distinctions. They had, you had Indian people, colored people, then you had Africans. And so their laws differentiated people because they could live in certain areas and they could have certain privileges. Anyway, so quote unquote colored people speak Afrikaans as their mother tongue. And they are a mixture of Khoisan and Cape Malay, because there were slaves that came from Malaysia and those kind of islands that came to Cape Town, which some of them are from a Muslim background, but they've mixed up quite a lot, and there's a lot of sort of mixed race, if I can call it that, just to kind of give you a reference of what they look like, speak Afrikaans as their first language. And so even the character played by Brandon Daniels, and who plays Osman, yes, he speaks Arabic, but also, and he's one of my favorite actors of all time. Like, he's amazing. But he in Cape Town, in that part of Cape Town, that community would speak a lot of Afrikaans. And so then Zulu, which when I was younger, like up till the age of 11, I spoke primarily at home, Zulu, Xhosa, very similar languages. And then because I moved into a boarding school, English became my first language. And then they were kind of mixed because I spent a lot of time at boarding school, and I'd go home at the end of the term, etc. And so that's, and so English, Afrikaans, and then Zulu, with multiple other African languages like isiTswana, Sibenda, Sepedi, those mixes. Those are different languages, but they're all there. So depending on where you grew up, your socialization. For example, my dad was born on a farm, and his parents were laborers. They were working for the farm owner. And he then learned Afrikaans because that was the language that was used there on the farm. And so later when we grew up, so it just depends on what part of the country you grew up, you would have learned one of these languages. Or learn some, a number of them. But English is by far, the medium of instruction in most schools and universities, and how business is, done in South Africa.
That's so interesting. Well, if I can follow up then, so I don't know if you can remember the specific scene, but in episode 1, there's a scene in which Sandy Schultz's character is questioning the informant, and she speaks English, and he asks her, so you're going to talk like a white person now, and they switch languages, and I was like, I don't know what language they're switching to.
So they switched to Afrikaans.
Okay,
so it's almost like,
so that's why I was confused. I was like, man, they're like, that feels like I guess to me, what I would consider like the colonizer language, I would assume would be like the white language.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
So, but now, interestingly, in South Africa, we almost had 2 colonizers, right?
Yes,
so you had the Dutch, and then the British.
Yeah.
And they even had their own war about who's going to rule this place, let alone the people they found.
Sorry, it's not funny.
Exactly.
But yeah.
So, but that's an interesting dynamic, And I mean, they had a brutal war themselves, let alone, what happened to Black people and African people. But isn't that interesting? Because those were 2 people of color that switched to Afrikaans, and that's the dynamic I was trying to describe to you. Is that there's that as well, that Afrikaans is their language that they've adopted in their culture. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I was so confused, and I appreciate you taking the time to explain all that.
I love that, because I think that's what's special about the show.
Yeah.
Is that you get a taste of those, it's such an interesting dynamic of culture and things that you thought you knew about the place, but then you discover other things. And like some of the characters there are practicing Islam, and some people maybe didn't know that Islam is quite a thing and where it comes from. And it came because when some of the slaves came from Malaysia, and that part of the world, that's the religion that they brought. But not everybody is, because there's a big Christian community there as well. That's Afrikaans speaking of color. That's very much Christian. And in Cape Town specifically, it's quite a melting pot of the mix of these cultures. Yeah.
Well, along with all the different languages, I mean, we also get to see the physical beauty of South Africa. Finally playing South Africa. We're used to filming in South Africa, but it's always playing everywhere else.
Exactly.
Like in Warrior, it's playing San Francisco. I mean, what? But it's just, you really feel immersed in South Africa watching this show because of the languages and because of the locations. And I just think, that's really just a comment of how fun it is to see in the different neighborhoods, even, within the city of Cape Town, and then going out into the Karoo, and, it's beautiful,
Can I mention something about Warrior? I believe, so quickly to jump on the feature film Rogue, you may have seen a picture or two, but Kenneth Falk, who's in that film, he looks Asian, but he's been in Warrior as well.
Yep.
And a lot of my colleagues were in that show as well. I mean, that was made in Cape Town.
Yeah. We love Warrior.
Oh, we love Warrior. Oh, do we love Warrior?
Can I ask you guys how I've just been looking at your blog, how it began, and who, if you were to what it's about, and who the audience are, the people that follow your blog, listen to your podcast,
Well, it started. Well, Kels, do you want to talk about that? It basically just started like, hey, you want to do a podcast?
Yeah,
sure, let's do a podcast.
We both are a part of, or we're part of another podcast that focuses on sci-fi and fantasy, and has a larger group, and was sort of tied to a website. It was kind of like the interview arm of the website. I mean, it's still going, but it's sort of reinventing itself. But we both love Strike Back. We started doing it, and I was like, it would be fun. We could do one that's just like all Strike Back and action related. And I reached out to Deb, and then we reached out to Jack Lothian, who's the showrunner of Strike Back. And he was like, sure, and I'll introduce you to whoever you want, and I'll give you behind the scenes stuff every week. And so he helped us out, and it just became this big thing. So our audience is really stemmed from that. People who love action. And people who love the realism of it. I mean, not, let's be real. Start with Strike Back. It's not always realistic, but the doing your own stunts, the getting dirty, the not always having to look like the beautiful people that, you see on network TV and these kinds of things so yeah, our audience, surprisingly heavily female. I would say over 50%, which a lot of people have been surprised by, because they sort of have a picture in their head of action fans are guys. But
thank you
that's
for blowing that.
Yeah. Actually, it's I think our breakdown looks at 60% women. So that's sort of our so now we have branched out. We are working some with HBO PR to do other future Cinemax shows that we enjoy, but mostly focused on action, just because we like to blow some shit up. So
yeah, exactly.
Guys, can we talk about now? As you guys are saying this, can we talk about MJ Bassett and even Philip Winchester? Because
well, I was about to piggyback. I was about to piggyback on what Kelsey said, because I run a page for Philip Winchester for Philip. And if you go through the blog, you can see there's several interviews and a Twitter page and stuff. So that connection is there naturally. And when I first saw the trailers and the ads for trackers, I went right to the picture of you, having seen you in that sort of group picture from Rogue. And I'm like, because one of my side things here is I always try to find, in everything that we do, I am convinced that there is a connection back to Strike Back for everything on the planet. And there are several connections
In Rogue,
with trackers to Strike Back. But the first one I found, like immediately was like, that dude's in Rogue. And he was in Rogue with Philip. Connection to Strike Back. So yeah, we are definitely interested in talking to you about Rogue and working with MJ. And because, you know, that's sort of our thing is, you know, Kelsey's not kidding when people are shocked that this podcast is run by two women who actually seem to maybe know what they're talking about. About action.
Absolutely. So the first thing, if I can, I mean, I'm kind of I'm friends with MJ still, so we text and you know, on social media we'll chat every now and then, and I'll see Philip, and Philip is you know, proud father, you know, and I'm also obsessed about my children. I love them to bits. So, but what was really fascinating, I learned so much from when we started just our boot camp, which was just getting ready for the shoot, and watching MJ and Philip. They had worked together a lot, obviously, and they were bringing sort of the Strike Back dynamic, you know, quote unquote, onto this show, onto the movie. And the first thing I picked up was MJ gets down and dirty. She doesn't expect her actors to do anything that she wouldn't do herself. Right. And so, man, we were initially. So even before I was auditioning for it, it warned us. It said, "Listen, you're going to be involved in a lot of physical activity. Are you fit enough to do this kind of thing? And are you prepared?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm ready. Come on." Boy, not. I wasn't aware at what level of involvement I had to be. So one of the producers, Molly Hessel, she's the American producer on Rogue. And I mean, later on, I had an ice pack for my knee, but we'll talk about that later. But we were really doing our own, as much as possible, stunts. Yeah. And so one of the executives from Mnet, in one of the EPKs, I talk about how I ended up doing a lot of my own stunts on trackers, and I did a lot of wire work in that. And so we spent a lot of time in the mat with the stunt team, the stunt coordinators, and the stunt choreographers. And I was trying to get in shape as much as possible. So back onto trackers now. I really loved it. From the day one, we said, "Listen, let's go spend time in the range. Give us let's shoot the rifles, let's shoot the real guns, and then let's get into it." What's interesting about my character is, although you'll be shooting in a traditional way, like for trained armed forces, whether, you know, your special force, your army, your police, or any of those, there's a traditional way of holding a rifle that's proper for aim, etc. So
Yuri doesn't do that.
Yuri doesn't do that, right? So you guys, please. I'm going to send you a video of us in the range if it's going to be useful for you. Yeah. Because our director is from Finland, Yuri, and in this video he talks about, like, Mkunzi doesn't come from a traditional sense, so he has to have like a gangster style way of holding, but you still have to be super comfortable with it. So that was interesting as well. It's almost like learning an accent for shooting your rifle, because you've got to make it as part of your character's thing. And so I mean, in the range there's the live ammo, because you're in a real shooting range, and so on set obviously you never use live ammo in some ranges, but and then in the range, because you're shooting at a target, you have to shoot a real bullet. On a movie set, you're shooting a blank that's just like, it makes a loud noise, and you can see the flash. By the way, guys, as you can see, I'm very passionate about action. I love the action. In South Africa, I made a lot of drama and comedy, but as I grew, I was like, I got to get into the gym and make my body to be able to do the things that I wanted to do. And so spending time, guys, with a lot of the stunt guys, this was amazing, especially on trackers. There's a stunt double to Lemma that you may have seen in the previous episode, where the truck comes. Lemma's character jumps out of the truck, a moving truck. I spent time with this guy prepping for his jump, right? Because stunt guys do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
They are the ones who might actually die. Like, it's not a joke.
Yeah.
Because somebody has to jump.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a stunt guys. And the more I spend time with them, I just have so much respect. So I was asking them a lot about how they prep and how they get their bodies ready for this. I mean, you might hear of other action stars like Tom Cruise or whoever, like that does more of their own stunts, or even Charlize Theron. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So I started some boxing, and I was like, next I'm going to do a mixed martial arts, just because you want to be able to stretch your legs and your arms so that if you're doing a choreography, because sometimes the camera needs to be here, you need to pretend to take a hit and like return another kick. So you need to be able to balance your body for the camera shot. Mm-hmm. And so watching Philip on set, I was surprised how this actor had really embodied the physique of a special forces soldier, you know, because he was able to do the stuff. And I would watch him stretch and warm up, and we would talk about different exercises that the guys do. So I would ask as much as possible, and even sometimes say to the stunt guys, when I'm back in Cape Town, I just want to come and gym with you. The stunt guys do a lot of that work. A lot of their work is preparing, whether they're doing work with knives, it's mixed martial arts, it's wrestling, it's boxing. I can talk about this all day, but I love it.
Yeah. Well, you're talking to the right people.
Yeah.
So we can talk about it all day. So don't worry about that.
We had the opportunity to talk to Paul Shapcott, who was the stunt coordinator for the last 2 seasons of Strike Back, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Just talking about all the stuff, and and of course the stuff that they get excited about. And he's like, "We got to set a guy on fire," and I'm like, "That sounds terrible," But he's like, "It's amazing," just like all the things that are. Yeah, I mean, jumping, from a helicopter, leaping through glass, all the things that are.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
And it's, we really like to get into the nitty gritty of how these things are done. We don't want to just talk about, ooh, look at Hottie McHottie Pants, hitting somebody. Well, Kelsey does, but, we love to learn about the intricacies of how you really do this job, and how, everything that it takes to put that 45 minutes or hour of television together. So you're talking to kindred spirit when you're talking about teach me. I want to know everything.
Yes. So can I talk about, which I really, really loved in the coming episode? There is a bit of a shootout with Gunzi involved. And I won't give any spoilers, but I'll talk about just some of the prep and what we did for that.
Please, yes.
So one of the interesting things, guys, is when an actor needs to fire a gun and the camera has to come really, really close, because of the danger of like some of some debris that might come from the gun, sometimes they put a glass in front of the camera, right, and then the camera guy has to wear like protective gear, and they wear gloves, right? So because even the weapons we use on set, they're all they're stunt weapons, they're not real. So down the barrel of the gun, they'll weld across. That's number one, okay? And the bullets they use nothing ever comes out of the barrel. In other words, there's no lead. Right. But what comes out is it's almost like it's like a small little flash and explosion. It's really loud. It's a form of a real bullet, but because when the hammer hits it, it'll go. It's still a real gun. It's just that the bullet that are used are stunt bullets that just make a flash, and there's no lead in the front. That's the first thing. But also the guns, they're real guns that just get welded like with the cross, so that nothing could ever really come out. So anyway, one of the interesting things about that is they'll offer you earplugs, right? Because they're really, really loud, and people wear earplugs. And I don't know if you've seen in some of the behind the scenes, the armorer will say, "Weapons are hot," and they'll announce, "Weapons are hot." So everybody's aware that loud noise is about, and so that's one, which always gets me excited. I love making movies so much. So weapons are hot. And so for me, on trackers, I say to the armorer, listen, what's your limit on these things? And he said, no, I mean, they're cool. Like, what do you want to do? And I used to say to him, I love the sound of a machine gun going off, right? And I felt like it would always get me into the Nkunzi mode, who's a little bit like that. You never know with him, right? So
right, yeah.
Yeah, he's such a dangerous character. So once or twice before we start filming, I'll just say, we'll say to the first AD, I'm going to fire off a few rounds. He says, yes, go for it. And the armor give it to me. And I just fire. Boom, 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 boom. And that would kind of get my blood, like, worked up, because it helps you to feel it. And because now the gun's also got, it's a little bit of a kick and all of that stuff, so which was amazing. So that's one little antidote that I loved about in any of the sort of big scenes where he's menacing. I'd fire off a few rounds on set and they would allow me. I would ask, and the armorer would do that, which is great. Now, talking about the shootout, my first piece of wire work was on trackers, which is very interesting. I had a stunt double, but I said to them, I want to try everything myself first. So they said, okay, there's pads for your knee, there's pad for the side of your hip, because if you fall on your side, there's that bone there, if that hits the ground, that could be quite painful. So it was very interesting to put all of that stuff on. And then I practiced the falls a few times on the mat, right? And then Yuri said, okay, we're on the wide now, guys, take the mats away. And I was like, I didn't have time to say, okay, bring in my stunt double. I said, and then they said, weapons are hot, roll camera. And I thought, let's go. I used to play rugby growing up. So I remember from rugby, when you score a try, sometimes you dive. So the falls I was kind of used to, but I hadn't done it in a while. Anyway, long story short, I did some of my own dives, which looked good, so good on camera, because he shot that in 25 frames. So the slow-mo is amazing of that stuff, because you see in that shot, you see the gun going off, and you see him almost fly across the air while he's shooting like that, and you land. And I thought to myself, you can't do that with a double, because it's one shot, And of course, you go home, you've got some bruises, and now you need to get an ice pack, whatever. But I feel like it's so worth it. And the more I spoke to the stunt guys, even going back to the Lemma bit where his stunt double was jumping off of a moving truck, and I was asking him just the mental preparation of, because he actually jumped out of a moving truck, right? And then he rolls. And I mean, that's their day-to-day job, right? So, and he was just talking about like preparing the body for that. And it's about fitness. And not only that, but just the mental preparation of, I will do the jump, I can't do the jump. Because in real life, soldiers or people like in those kind of situations, they have to do those kind of things a lot. So I found that really, really interesting. And to end it off about the wire work, so I had to wear this vest, and so the vest is what they'll hook the wire onto, and so then what they do is they pull you, and it gives it. So like probably on Warrior there was probably a lot of this stuff, because somebody's kicked and then they fly across the room. It's it's wire work, and it's a little technical as well, because you got to work with those guys and you've got sell it, and then what they do is they'll paint the wire out in post-production, that you don't see. But some of these shots, guys, are so, it's like a 3-second shot, so sometimes it's a 2-second shot. But the prep that goes into it, because they bring in this huge jib or machine that carries oh man. But I love it, right? And when we see the final thing, I'm always impressed.
Well, I love the wire work, and I feel like anytime you can fly across the screen while shooting a bullet, like you're like, I'm an action star, and that's all there is to it. Like, that's it.
Did you just call me an action star?
An action star. You flew across the screen shooting a gun. I think that makes you a qualified action star.
Yes. Yeah. I take that, guys. I've been officially knighted as an action star. Thank you.
So I want to ask you, because one of the things, as you talk about like shooting a machine gun, getting you pumped up, and this is one thing we actually talked to quite a lot of the Strike Back actors about is your brain doesn't always, your brain can't disassociate what's happening to it when you're pretending in that moment as pretend from like if you were actually in a firefight shooting a gun. And they talked about this sort of like not necessarily PTSD in a way that like soldiers deal with, but the like adrenaline rushes, the come down, the difficulties like sort of coming back from that, because when you're shooting guns all the time and it's loud and it's, you know, you get pumped up and you're pretending to be at war, to come back from that is very difficult. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about if you had the same experience and then how you would sort of like reset yourself afterwards.
So I'll talk about the experience both on the feature film Rogue as well as Trackers. Interestingly, the same armorer worked on both projects.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And so, I mean, he's also quite precious about these guns. As I mean, these weapons are, so this is really interesting things. On most action films I've worked on, the armorers are ex-soldiers.
Right.
They are guys that always have stories about being in actual battle because they've been in the army. One of the interesting thing, Kels and Deb, is while let's say we're on set and you've got a real gun and you're just practicing and you move the barrel this way. Some people get freaked out. They say, hey, don't point a gun in my face. Oh, don't do that. Like, and so even for set protocol, I've noticed they're very strict about doing that. And till this day, I wonder, I'm like, if we all know that we're in a movie set and these guns aren't, because they are real, but they've been converted.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know. Some people talk about how did Bruce Lee die? You know, what happened to Bruce Lee? And do accidents happen on movie sets? So first of all, because they're real guns that have been converted, and like when they put the bullets in the gun, like you can see, it's a real bullet that's just, instead of a piece of lead, it has something else. So first of all, that kind of threw me, it like the people's reaction reminded me that you've got a real gun in your hand.
Right.
That's the first thing. The metal is real, everything about it, how the hammer hits, it's like, it's real. So, and because, you know, we would practice in a shooting range, shooting actual live ammo, because you have to shoot at a target and you got to see like how well you're doing. And sometimes you put on these things. And when the bullet flies out, this was one of the interesting things, or when I fired Kunzi things, the shells, they pop out and they're really hot.
They're hot.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're very hot. So if your co-star is here, I mean, you're running lines, it's a dramatic moment,
Right.
but you've got real live fire. And so sometimes my one actor, he was so close to me that the shells popped and they're hot and one hit him here. And it's like we're on a 2-shot and it on his neck and the thing is burning, but he's got a gun as well.
Yeah.
And so those are some of like, it's true. Those are some of the real things. And here's what's fascinating. So the special effects team, if you're being shot at, they will shoot, what do you call it? What's a game people can play, like paintball, right? Have you ever felt how sore paintball is when if they shoot
it
you?
hurts. Yeah.
It hurts. So they've got these special paintballs that they shoot that make dust. That make dust.
Dust hits.
Dust hits, right? So, and I mean, sometimes accidents can happen. So if you're on a mid shot and the special effects guy has to shoot at you, also that's real because it's like a paintball that's coming right at you on that. So it's gonna hit there, and like a director like MJ tries to get as close. Oh, I love MJ, but she pushes it like, and she loves that stuff as well. So.
I can't imagine. I'm just thinking the self-control not to react, because like you can't react to a bullet by the time before it hits you, but like you know there's this thing like coming towards you, and to not be like, you know, like
exactly. So sometimes they want to put in the stunt guy, but you know, even with the mature actors, like even with Philip, there were a few times I said to MJ, no, it's fine. I want to do it. Don't put my double in. Let's try. And then, because now you got to, and it's eye contact with your special effects guy, because you have to trust them. Right. I mean, we have because we love blowing shit up. Like, so in one of the scenes, there's a wall that gets blown up, okay? And this wall has to blow up, and then you have to run through the rebel as it's. But so they'll come to you and they'll say, okay, these bricks aren't real bricks, but this is the rubble that's going to be flying and the debris that's going to be flying. And as action stars, you're supposed to be the brave one who freaking runs through the stuff. So there's a lot of that beforehand where you communicate, and it's also going to be a loud noise. I mean, there's explosions. There's a lot of explosions in Rogue as well. No spoilers, but I mean, it's an action movie. But long story short,
it's MJ Bassett. There's explosions.
there's explosions. So it's about getting ready for that. And, they'll prep you. How loud will it be? Do you want an earplug? But I think in all of that, as an actor, you do want to look after yourself, because in the end, let's be real. There's a distinction between you and the stunt guy.
Right.
So your job is to, serve the whole story. It's no good if Sisanda hurts his knee or gets a scar. You can't finish the movie, So you do need to, so that's the balance for me. And I think, like I had my kids visit set a few times. At the time they were 8 and 9. So you got little kids, and I mean, there are days that I know that the stuff that we're going to film is not good for children to see. But if it's, because they're boys, and they, the TV games that they like to play, they find it interesting. They love that kind of stuff. But I balance that. So I'll say, hey, by now they know, like, Daddy, you're playing that guy. They know the difference between this is Sisanda, this is Daddy playing Nkunzi. So I think in some of the practices I found, which I really like being in Cape Town, taking a walk at the beach at the end of the shoot day, and just like simple breathing exercises, kind of semi-meditation of almost debriefing your mind and your body would help to sort of let go of the day, let go of the character, and that stuff. But in all fairness, I do like the stuff. So when your body's all beaten, tired, and you've heard a lot of gunshots that day, and there was blood splattering and what, yes, there's all of that, but I do enjoy it, and that's kind of the way sort of I would, it's like taking a shower and you kind of just wash the day away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we started talking a little bit about Rogue, so we might as well keep going, because we definitely want. Philip did tell us quite a bit about the movie. So not only were you running through blowing up brick walls and shooting at each other, but you also had to not get eaten by a lion. So can you tell us, we know a little bit about his character, but can you tell us more about the character that you play? Is it Prada? Is that?
Pata, yeah. So yes, Pata is very interesting because Pata, so he's a local, and the film is kind of set in a nondescript African country, but it's very much inspired by Kenya or present-day Kenya. And the story does involve like an Islamist extremist group. And Pata was once part of that, but has since turned and left that. And so he then often, because he's got inside knowledge, often gets called in to kind of help groups that are navigating their way through that landscape. So so that's Pata's kind of scar in history, is that he had suffered some trauma from that group. And he since left them, obviously, but when he was first sort of kind of indoctrinated, he didn't fully understand what it was when he was getting into it, but because there's a difference between Islam and then any extremist group, right? So, and I like that because when we had these discussions with MJ, I said, I want us let's be careful of painting a group of people in a particular way that might not be fully accurate, and also only giving one point of view, because not everybody is one thing, right? So, I mean, even in today's modern politics, people would be, there's protests against police brutality, but some of the leaders will say, not every police officer is like that. So we need to be careful and aware of that and not say all police are bad people. They're not, And so even in this dynamic, so Pata came out of that thing, and so he was once trained in that way. And he's a man who wants to do good. His character and Samantha, played by Megan Fox, they kind of, they form a bit of a bond through the story. And Jessica Sutton, who is, she's in a show called Motherland as well.
Oh yeah, yep.
About young witches. So she, and I think, so when we met, she was between Canada and South Africa because I think of filming the two shows, but we have a bit of some nice scenes in the movie as well. Kenneth, that we spoke about, Kenneth is in a very interesting Western called Five Fingers from Marseille.
Okay. I haven't heard of that. Okay.
So it's set
down.
Yeah.
Five Fingers from Marseille, set in Lesotho, which is part of South Africa, in beautiful mountainous, and it's a full-on Western. I'm such a fan of that movie. And
Okay.
I mean, the cinematography there, the action, check it out. I mean, it's in Sesotho with subtitles, but yeah, very interesting. And I think that, did you guys ever see Raid Redemption?
Oh my God!
We love Raid Redemption.
Oh yes,
When Deb made a reference to Hottie McHottie Pants, that's what I called Joe Taslim from Warrior and Raid Redemption. So that's because I couldn't remember his name in the first couple of episodes, and I was like, that really hot guy who can fight.
Yeah, and so the whole cast calls him that now.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's one of my, I love that kind of action. Raid, and even the second one. What's interesting is that I'm producing as well. And I started conversations with XYZ, which is the distributor of Raid. So it's an American company, XYZ Films, and I was very impressed. So anyway, I think they distribute Five Fingers from Marseille as well.
Okay, great.
And so it's in Sesotho, but it's I love it. And so, when I watch movies like that, I'm like, how many hours? I don't mind. I put in a lot of work for preparing for roles. And that's why I love the transformation. So as much as I love a lot of action, like actors like Daniel Day-Lewis for me, or, people that are so committed that they'll do the work to do the transformation, whether it's physical, it's your accent, one of the British actors that I really admire, he's in Mad Max, and he's also in
Tom Hardy.
What's his name? Tom Hardy, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, just Tom's preparation for one of his fight movies. I think what's it called? Where he plays an MMA fighter.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about, but my brain is not working.
Mm-hmm.
He's a phenomenal actor. He's also phenomenal in Peaky Blinders as well.
Yeah.
In the season of that he's in. Yeah.
I've heard that. So when we even started with Trackers, the first thing I said to the production, I said, you got to get me a trainer. So because, the discussion was, he's larger than life. Nkunzi's larger than life. So I said, let's put on the muscle. And they got me a really good trainer that also looked after my diet. So I was able to put on a couple of kilograms to mass up for camera. And so that kind of work, for me, I'm committed to doing it, it pays off so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's phenomenal. We're very excited for Rogue. We cannot wait for that to be done and out big. Hopefully that'll be a big cinema release here, and then you'll be like cemented as an action star everywhere,
But guys, I wonder, COVID-19, when do you think cinemas will open again?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
we're pretending that's not the question. The cinemas will be fine. No, I know, but they even announced, I think this morning or yesterday, that a lot of the big films that have been moved to next year have now been moved to 2022, like Wonder Woman and those kind of big releases have been pushed back a full 2 years as opposed to a year, which is sort of
Right.
disconcerting. But now you said you are shooting right now. Is that right? So how are
Correct.
things there with I'm
think-
assuming quarantine is over or
So our government has. I was writing a note that I want to send you a picture of what life is like on a movie set, because now people are wearing masks
Right.
and they sanitizing their hands. Like, we can't even all sit around and eat lunch together because we have to keep social distance. So the reality, basically the industry in South Africa is open under very strict protocols.
okay.
And one of the series had started filming, and sort of 2 weeks into it, one of the crew members tested positive for
Oh, geez.
the coronavirus, and then they had to shut down the entire production.
Mhm.
And I mean, a lot of our, those are people's jobs, and and people then had to go back home into quarantine, and everybody has to get tested, and everybody. So it's weird. Like, actors, you don't arrive on set and you hug people. There's none of that now.
Right.
So your makeup artist is wearing a mask and a face shield, and she's going to sanitize her hands and the makeup chair, everything. Like, and we've got a medic on set that on the hour walks around sanitizing everybody's hands. And like, so the medic's job has gone from sit around, do nothing on set for the day, to like working around the clock. Because when everybody arrives on set, we stand in a queue and she has to take our temperature. It's like a screening of, are you showing any signs of having it's really a weird world, but that's how South Africa is doing it. And so far it's working.
That's interesting. They put out. We were talking before we added you in, that they've announced a few of the guidelines for like LA to go forward, and one of them was actors have to stay 6 feet away from each other, and if they're in a scene together, they can only say like 2 sentences to each other, and then they have to like move apart. And I'm like, how are you gonna have like you're gonna have? And Deb was like, it's gonna be like one camera on one person, and then 6 feet away the other camera on the other person, and they're having to like pretend they're looking into each other's eyes and having a conversation, and I think everything is going to look really weird for a while.
Yeah, and the show I'm doing now it's a drama series, and so I mean, there were originally a lot of sort of kissing scenes, and so when we go back now, people were like,
you're like, blow a kiss.
I was like,
Love you.
I'm like, guys, how are we gonna do this? So, and then it's also about self-quarantine. So if you're in a production, giving loyalty to that production in the sense that you can't go around and interacting with many other people, because you might get the virus and then bring it onto the set. Right. So but I think we're managing, and it's just people have to be conscientious, like of a lot of these things. But I mean, I'd rather make movies, so I'm like, if we need to be safe, let's be safe, and let's make the movie.
Yeah. Can you tell us what you're working on now, or is that secret?
Is it secret?
For now, it is a little bit of a secret, but but at least this time around, I'm not playing the super bad guy.
Okay.
And there's some love involved. I'll say that much.
Okay. All right. Well, we're excited for that then.
6 feet away, love.
Yeah. Distant high five, love. Well, this is perfect. We love guests who like to talk about their job. It makes it much more fun and and easy than like trying to pull out like, so what did you do today?
I could talk. There's so much. I mean, if you guys are giving me permission, there's so much I want to talk about. Have you guys ever spoken to? Oh man, I mean the guys that made Raid. Sometimes I watch over and over some of those sequences, but I really admire the martial artists in that, and just like, because it looks so real, and like what the camera needs to do with each punch and kick and fall, and man.
It's an incredible movie.
Yeah.
It really is. We constantly talk about it.
Yeah.
And that was one of our favorite things about the final season of Strike Back. I don't know if you've gotten to see any of it, but there's a lot of homage to the raid.
Yeah, there's a
in-
couple of one
yeah.
shots that are really in a building, and there's a lot, like, it feels very like that. Yeah.
Oh, it's a homage to Raid. It's
Yeah.
so
They did a whole lot of little things to little references to previous seasons, as well as sort of movies that they all love.
Yeah.
So
But
there's
the
a
raid
lot.
one jumps out at you.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very like it's literally in like this crazy building, and they're going up the stairs, and they're just
Yeah.
fight after fight after fight after fight after fight. That like it's
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
And
But yeah.
Alin Sumerwada just is incredible.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Plays Novin, unbelievable this season. Man, that woman can do stunts.
So, guys, let me ask you: the American audience. I mean, number one, Raid is not an American film. It's obviously it's made. What country is it from again?
Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Malaysia, and it's subtitled in English, right?
Correct.
So
Right.
it's
Yep.
Yep. How does that kind of do in America? Do you think American audiences get put off if something is not English, or?
Yes and no. I think maybe we have a bias here because we deal mostly with people who are really big action fans, right? You have to be super into action to want to listen to a podcast, for 45 minutes or an hour about action, right? Like, you're not just a casual audience. So there are people who love action. Everybody knows the Raid. Like that, and everybody involved with making Strike Back, and everybody involved that we talked to that made Warrior, all of them know, and love it. Now, if I walk down the street and ask any of my neighbors, probably not. So I think it's sort of like how people can be super horror fans and they know all these crazy like indie horror movies that I personally would have no idea what they're talking about, because I'm like, that's terrifying. What are you talking about? I don't want to have nightmares tonight. So,
but I think the Raid specifically is a film that really sort of you can watch that film and never understand a word that's said and still understand the film, because it's
beautiful
not
shot, it's phenomenal action.
There's so much emotion in it as well, just communicated through the cinematography of it. That you don't necessarily have to even know what's being said, and it's not exactly overwrought with dialogue, so you can. The subtitles are not difficult to follow since it isn't terribly dense with dialogue. But I think one of the things that the ability to watch so much more international television and movies now with all the internet streaming and other ways of getting a hold of material, I think that's really leveling the playing field. That if I know that if there's something made in Iceland that I really want to see, I'm probably going to be able to get my hands on that. And so I think that's really doing a service to action and to all types of film and television, that it's so accessible now. You're no longer trapped with just American television and having to watch endless hours of reality crap.
I do think also the subtitles, I think Americans are finally sort of becoming more accustomed to, like, it's okay to read and it's okay to watch stuff and other stuff, and plus you're being exposed to stuff like with Trackers, where it takes place in South Africa with a South African cast by a South African writer that actually shows life in South Africa, as opposed to what we think of and has been portrayed by American production companies as taking place something in Africa. Parasite, the Korean film, these things that are sort of like becoming, Warrior takes place obviously in San Francisco, was shot in South Africa, but they use Mandarin and English very interchangeably in a super cool way that is like, you have this, the way they do it is really phenomenal. And I think audiences are becoming more open to the fact that, one, you're going to experience really cool new stuff if you'll just watch stuff that's not just in English. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I'm happy, and I'm really passionate to be able to, for African filmmakers or from wherever you are, to be able to share your culture and just like maybe things that people haven't seen on screen, that like gives me a lot of joy. And even just talking to you guys and just hearing just your passion and what you're enjoying about the shows already. I'm so excited to be able to tell Dion Mayer, the author, because we've been talking about making something together.
Hey.
Yes. There's a series I created with a partner of mine a few years ago, and with this show's success, the Mnet was just saying, "Hey, what do you guys, do you want to make another thing?" And I was like, "Listen, I've been working on something." And anyway, so we're talking about a show, and I'm also reading another Dion Mayer book, which is really, really good. So I'd be really excited. I mean, on the side, I said to MJ, a third project of mine that I had co-written and I've been working on for the past 5 years. I said to her, when we finished, I said, MJ, I want to send you this script, and maybe, I don't know. So anyway, MJ is like, I'll read it, and let's see. And the reason why I give that particular script to MJ is because it's got a lot of action. And having spent probably something like 35 days making Rogue, and just the action that we, and working just with her, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought that, she's a kind of director that can handle action really, really well. That's not necessarily like on a massive budget. Like, I mean, what I imagine studio budgets look like. I mean, this is an independent film. Yes, we hope it can be distributed by one of the best distributors ever. But like, that's what's interesting is South Africa is also able to make quality stuff, maybe not as expensive as it would be if it was made in another country.
Right. Yeah. And it's really, South Africa has become, really popular place to make television for all over the world. So, and movies, people are starting to recognize, oh, that's probably South Africa, when we're watching.
But it's nice to
There's
see
a
like
season of
you
Homeland
actually.
that was made here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the stars of Trackers was in Homeland as well, right? One of the I don't know his name. Yes. I'm like, I know him from Homeland. Yep. Yeah, that was
Guess
cool.
what, guys? This is the one thing I can tell you.
Okay.
The show I'm currently shooting now, Maren is one of the producers.
Hey.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Well, when
We
you
love
can
this.
tell us more, come back on the podcast.
And
Yeah, so he's actually a comedy. I met him when he was writing a lot of comedy, and there's a sitcom called says Top Line. Before that, he was in a sitcom that like ran for 3 or 4 years in South Africa, very popular sitcom that Maren was in. So he's quite like, he's been around. So he writes and he produces and he's an actor. But so his company is making the drama series that I'm in now.
Okay.
oh, cool.
And yeah.
That's
Awesome connections. Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, okay. Well, wow, we've been talking for a long time.
What time is it? Time flies when you're having fun.
And could keep talking. So please come back when these other projects start popping up, because we'd love to talk to you again about all of them.
Yeah, especially when Rogue comes out, we definitely need to chat.
Oh, yeah.
So we're hoping we get to chat with MJ, maybe Philip. So maybe we could do like a reunion, have you guys all on together.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. But we always wrap up the show with the same question. And it's a question that Philip gave me one time I don't know when he gave it to me, but and when I asked him about working on Strike Back, and so we use it to close everything, all of our podcasts with, and it's because you're filming Rogue or you're filming Trackers, and you're all sort of going through all of that action and having to come down from everything, and you're just kind of slogging through all that shit together, but then you look back on it with rose-colored glasses. So can you tell us what your highlight for either Trackers, Rogue, or both, what was the highlight of your season, and then what was your low light for your season? Or maybe reverse that. Give us the bad stuff first.
And it can be either something you got to shoot or something you were going through at the time, or difficulty. We've had everything from like the toilets were the worst part to, saying goodbye. So
maybe one of the semi lowlights on Trackers is when Trackers was premiering in South Africa. I just started filming on Rogue, and Rogue was filming in a ranch that's like almost an hour outside of town. And so there was a lot of sort of press and like some events that I couldn't do because I committed to this movie, and you would travel maybe for 2 hours to get to set. And you're leaving home like at 3 a.m. to get there, or you leave like at 4 to get there at 6. You shoot an entire day. And so a part of me feels like, yeah, but that I was a little bit sad of missing some of the promotional stuff for Trackers. Yeah, so that's one. But I loved making Rogue, like I said. So in one of the sequences, not to give away too much, but we're in some water on Rogue, and I
MJ loves to put people in water too.
Oh yeah, so it's her thing, right? So there's wetsuits. When it's time for Rogue to come out, I hope I still have my funny video in a wetsuit because I look like a Teletubby. But and so you put on, so we wore these wetsuits underneath, and then you wear like your army sort of regalia, all of that stuff on top. But in the end, we didn't really need it because it wasn't too cold. But low light for Rogue is, so I fell and I hurt my knee. And I heard it real bad because I fell on it. And I think I fell on, it was a rock or something. And so now, here I am on set, semi-limping.
Yeah.
And I go to MJ, and because I love my work so much, I was like I have to finish this movie, And MJ said, which the beauty about what she did with that movie is like she shot it in sequence, right? So we never had to go back story-wise to anything. And she was like, well, we'll just make the limp part of what your character has now. And I was so relieved because sometimes I was really in pain, right? So, but our producer Marley was she was so supportive. She used to play like a lot of ice hockey and stuff like that. And she was like, listen, this is what you need to do every day. And the producer was phoning me at night, checking up on me, and I thought that was really sweet. And so I was seeing the physio, and every day I would go to the physio and stuff. So that was probably the only thing that was a bit of a low light in Rogue. But yeah, I guess learn from that. Yeah.
And your highlights?
Highlights. Oh my gosh, where do you start? What one of my highlights really is, guys, to be honest with you, is like talking to you two even now.
Oh, come on. Please,
Do you know,
no, I'm just kidding.
because you look into like a lens, and a camera is just like a black, it's an intricate, expensive piece of equipment. But when we're performing, most of the time, the people we're doing it for are not there, right? And the people who appreciate the work are not there. So when you get to speak to people who have loved the work, who've seen it, who appreciate it, that's really satisfying because we're in service of the audience. And so for me, sometimes it's always so nice to like see or hear the audience and how people react to the work that you guys work so hard to put together. That's really it's always so satisfying for me to hear from them. So really it is, yes, it's nice to make the work and it looks great, but you're making it for people. And really the purpose is to bring joy to people, And so when you see the joy, it's satisfying.
Thanks, and tune in next week for another Need to Know session at the Crib. Follow us on Twitter @StrikebackCrib. Out.